have 3:33, and at this time we'll call the meeting of the Kansas City Commission to order. And with that, Commissioner Ray, would you lead us on invocation?
Father, we come before you today thankful for the city of Canyon. We are thankful for our first responders. We are thankful for the citizens of Canyon, and Father, we continue to ask for your protection over our community, and we continue to ask that you will lead us, those that make decisions, to make wise decisions that will better serve the people of our community. Father, we thank you for the cooler weather, and I'm just grateful that you have given us the opportunity to live in Canyon, Texas. In your name we pray.
And with me, right hand over the heart.
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that takes us to the approval of the minutes of the meeting of September 7th, 2021. Second. A motion second to approve the minutes as written. All in favor signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes. All right, item number 5, public comment. Comments from interested citizens. Rachel?
I have not had anybody sign in here.
All right, thank you. Item number 6, to consider and take appropriate action, presentation for tax increment reinvestment zone tiers presented by Travis James, VP of TXP Inc. John?
And Travis is here to share with us today, and you all met Travis previously with the Friesen Nichols team. He's out of Austin, so hearing that there was no one signed in to speak, I'm sure he was amazed at that, because your typical Austin city council within 4 to 5 hours of people speaking on some issue, I'm sure.
2 minutes is all they get.
But it's typical.
So it takes all night.
But he's here to share with us, and he's got a great PowerPoint, and I think he'll give you a general overview of tiers. You know, we've talked about that before. It was something you all said we were interested in, so we'll let Travis go.
Great, thank you. It's good to be here again. Travis James with TXP. We do economic and public policy consulting. I'm going to stand a little bit over to the side so y'all can look at that. On the next slide, it's a little blurb about who we are. We've been doing this a long time. Firm's been around 35 years, worked all over the state, worked on 30 or 40 different tourist projects. I know this is new to y'all, so stop me. So I'm going to go over what I'll call a Tourist 101, how it works, how you can spend the money, a proposed tourist that makes sense, I think, for downtown Canyon, which we can adjust, although there are some state laws that regulate what it can look like, and then a real high-level conservative revenue forecast. So on the next slide, this is what a tourist is. It's a tool used by local governments to pay for public projects. All the revenue that's collected in the zone today stays in the zone. We're only talking about allocating future increments. So you hear the word generated $10 today for the general fund and the OINS. That still goes there. It's anything above the $10 we're talking about. So that's true whether it's the city, the county. That's how these zones work everywhere. Each taxing jurisdiction can choose to join or not join, and you can determine what percent of that future revenue you can allocate to the zone. On the next slide. So this is a depiction. The tax base in the downtown area that I'm looking at is about $19 million. That's the base. Any growth we have is the orange. And let's just say we pick a tourist that's 50 years. Most are 20 to 30. Let's just say it's 50 years. At the end of 50 years, all the tax revenue goes back to the general fund as if the tourism never existed. So that's the gray. Does that make sense? So the $10 you get today, you keep. Any portion of the growth over the next 20, 30 years goes to downtown, pays for projects in the zone. Once it terminates, all the money goes back to like how it was before there was a tourist. That makes sense, everybody? Okay. On the next slide, here are the steps. Kind of boring, but the key thing is if we want to lock in the 2021 base value, we have to do it this year. If we wait until next year, we restart with the 2022 base value. So if we pick 2021, We get increment in 2022, and that's not due until January 31st of 2023, just like your regular property taxes get paid. So it takes a year or two to build up this increment. So this isn't going to solve all your problems overnight. You just got to put the tool in place to have it. So that's what a lot of cities do. I'm going tomorrow night to Victoria, same thing in downtown Victoria. So lots of cities have these downtown tours, between 5 and 15 people who sit on the board. You get to appoint them. Any taxing jurisdiction that participates also gets to appoint one person. There are two kind of key rules when you set up a tours, and it'll make sense when you see the picture. You can't have more than 30% of the value at the time of creation be residential. So it's got to be 30% or less. So you couldn't put this over an existing residential area, is what I'm saying. And then depending on how big your city is or isn't, you can't have more than 25 or 50% of your tax base in a bunch of different terms. Not an issue here because you don't have one. So those are kind of the two rules. The 30% residential at the time of creation, and then how much of your total tax base are in these terms. So it's not really exciting. Go back one more slide, and you'll see a timeline. If we put this in place in 2021, I got to come back in about 6 weeks. You got to have a public hearing. I know y'all do things on 2 readings. So if we do it this year, oh yeah, there's just one. Okay, I'm sorry, on just one. So there is a little bit of a timeline. You do have to have a public hearing. Typical posted 7 days in advance. Have to have people be able to speak. All of those kinds of things. So here's what I think makes sense. This zone's a little bit bigger. On the next slide, how we define downtown for the downtown comp plan. But it goes up from the highway down to 6th Avenue. Not a perfect square, but that's the zone that we think makes sense. It picks up a lot of the catalytic projects that are coming out of the downtown plan. So the future growth associated with those projects will be picked up here. On the next slide, you'll see in the aerial, a little bit better to read. You see the square there. You see Nesbitt Park down there. This is the statue up there at the top, Tex Randall. So this is the area. So there's room for redevelopment. Some empty parcels, some parcels that have been identified again in the downtown plan for where we could see future growth. On the next slide, this is a little bit messy. There's way too many colors, but there's not a better way to do it. This shows what the city owns, the county owns, your religious institutions, residential, commercial. So when I talked about that 30%, you do have a fair amount of residential. We're at like 29%. So if I want to expand the block, I got to make sure we add enough to compensate so we don't go over that 30% threshold on residential. That's the blue. That's just the nature of older downtowns. You have people living near the downtown areas. So I'll stop. Does this boundary make sense to y'all? I'm assuming you like the idea of a tourist. Do you think we're picking up key areas? You have the EDC property, the Palo Duro Outfitters. You have Joe Taco. You've got the two parcels to the north that the EDC owns. Some parking lots. What do y'all think? Does this make sense? Are we missing anything?
We wanted to pick up some of the highway because, you know, the EDC has a big lot right there by Tex Randall. We have a lot that we've been trying to solicit there and on down. There's a vacant lot on the corner of 15th right there.
That's the orange parcel next to the gray. You see that?
Right there, that's being solicited for commercial, and so it has potential. If you want to take that in, we can. It's right.
So again, we have time to tweak this. We can tweak this. Just don't give any more residential. We're going to add more commercial.
We can easily put that in because it's not residential.
It makes sense.
There's a economic development deal just a hair to the west that we might put in.
Okay, we can talk offline with John. We can add that in. What I try to do to make it easier for the appraisal district is pick out full blocks. I don't have to. It just makes it easier to describe. We're going to describe this not using meets and bounds, but a map and parcel IDs. So we can pick up half a block. It's sometimes easier to pick up a whole block. But let's just see what that looks like when we add it to there.
It is industrial. It
Okay.
is currently zoned industrial, I believe. Isn't that right, John? Light industrial. Where are you, Danny? You know the project I'm talking about? Light industrial zoning.
Still privately held?
No. publicly held.
Okay, well, we can add it, public doesn't hurt us, let's just not add residential.
See what's around, let's just see what's around if we can get there, right?
But we can get there, I promise you, we may have to get a little bit bigger, we may have to pick up some things to offset it.
Yeah.
I know this is owned by the city, it shows up in the appraisal district as the county.
Yeah.
I had John look into that, it's the park, it's the parking lot, who owns it? It shows up as county, I know it's a city property, so I left it there because that's how it shows up in the appraisal district.
Yeah.
On the next slide, so this area, this is the taxable value. It's about $18.9 million in 2021. The county and city must give different exemptions for residential, that's why there's a slight difference at the top. I don't know if they give it over 65 or they do something slightly different. It's not uncommon. These are usually close. So if the county joins, they will have a slightly different base value than every taxing jurisdiction because they give different exemptions or not, has a difference. So, you know, it's not a huge amount of the city, but I think it's enough long-term to generate revenue. On the next slide, for illustrative purposes, I said, let's make it 25 years. I think that makes sense for downtown. 100% contribution, held the tax rates constant, 2.5% appreciation, 5% discount rate. I just assumed we get $50,000 a year new taxable value. That's conservative. I mean, Joe Taco's worth about $700,000, but at this point, for illustrative purposes, I said everything appreciates at 2.5%, and we had $50,000 of new stuff a year for 25 years.
It
So
says
that-
on Joe Taco is owned by the EDC. And so once that sells, it's no longer publicly held. Just so everybody knows, it becomes a private.
Right, so anything the
It's like a new
EDC
program.
owns.
Like a new investment.
Correct, so that would get $700,000 immediately. Or if we tore something down or something got built like the Joe Taco, that gets us $700,000. I've done this very conservative, because y'all haven't done one of these before, so I just said assume $50,000. I think it's gonna be greater than that. So on the next slide, if both entities participated, it's about $1 million each over 25 years. You do a discount rate, it's about $400,000 each. Again, I think it's gonna be a lot more than that. But this is illustrative purposes, what we could generate over 25 years if we could get the county to join. It's not gonna pay for everything. It's not gonna magically pay for the courthouse. But I think it's an important tool to put in place today so we have that revenue stream 2, 3, 4 years down the road. That's why most cities put these in place, and it just takes time to grow.
For our humor, will you give some examples of what other tiers are doing with their tiers money?
Yes, let's talk about projects. You can pay for public infrastructure, you can do economic development grants, you can buy property, you can fix up sidewalks, you can do tax abatements with it. You can do a facade grant program. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. The trick is you've got to spend it in the downtown area. So that's why it's important that we get the right boundaries. You can acquire property, you can sell property, sidewalks, utilities, grants, professional services. If you need to hire an engineer to do something in the downtown area, you could do that. So it gives you a lot of flexibility what you can do. The trick is just how do we grow that base? How do we get more activity to take place in the downtown area? But again, if you wait till you have a project, you miss that base year. The trick is to get this in place before the activity starts, so the tourist captures that value. All right, let's just say we don't like it, we want to get rid of it in 3 or 4 years. You can. And the money that's built up goes back to the general fund of the participating taxing entities. The only caveat would be is if you issue debt. Once you issue debt, there's usually bond covenants. You can't do those kinds of things. Most people keep them, put them in place, and they spend the money. Denton's got one. I'm working in San Marcos has one. So again, this is a common tool, especially in downtown areas.
But the money's coming to the city anyway if we don't do one. We don't get the tax.
Correct.
It's just like setting it aside.
It's like setting it aside. It's also working with the county. That's why you see multiple entities. You have a board that gets to spend the money. It says, I think what it also does is sends a signal that we're committed to downtown. Here's this fund of money that we're going to reinvest in the downtown.
But we do get the county's portion increase too if they participate.
Right.
So
Correct.
Use them downtown.
A a big one, if they would be willing to do it, is school district too.
Yeah.
So that's,
Correct. For discussions.
Yeah, I think
Why
we-
would the county want to participate with the land?
Why would the county? Usually because they believe in economic development and they want to invest in the city. So you put a tool in place so every time there's a project, you don't have to keep going back to both entities. They have, there's one board that oversees the money. It's just a collaboration. It's very common to have both cities and counties. Sometimes hospital districts join, sometimes
Part of my,
community college districts.
they're down there too.
They're down there.
The county's office is down there.
No, I agree. I would, he said they want to participate in our development. I'm not even sure all of us want to participate in our development. I mean, that's a big issue oftentimes when it comes up. I mean, I see it.
But I think, again, I think it sends a signal to the community that we as your governmental entities are pulling together, working and focused on this area.
What's any disadvantage?
There's not. I mean, I would say the worst is if you collect the money, you don't have a project, and you have a bank account, and make this up of $10 million you could be spending on other things. At that point, I tell you, either find a way to spend it in downtown or get rid of the tourists.
You can dissolve it.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Other part criticism.
Other people also, sir, will issue debt. So if you have enough
Yeah.
growth, you'll get a private developer on these larger ones. I just did a 1,200-acre tourist in Brownsville. The developer's paying for infrastructure. Once the tourist can take on the debt itself, they take on debt, which is cheaper. They pay the developer off, and then the tourist carries the debt, not the city's balance sheet. So those are typically for larger projects.
Like a partnership with the developer.
Correct. So on these, you say, hey, look, you pay for something for us that we don't have the money for, and we'll use this to pay you back. And so the pay you back is you get the appreciation from all the properties around that project that also benefit. So if the developer is willing to put in a new sidewalk and it benefits all the parcels, they get paid back from the appreciation for all of those.
To one criticism, sometimes it's hard to jumpstart a tier sometimes if you don't have that increment coming right out.
Right.
If you don't have someone putting investment down in that area, it's hard to get jump-started. Well,
I agree with that.
that's one.
Yeah.
The other second, some cities are more conservative where they won't do debt, so they just have to collect for years until they feel comfortable enough to do a project or take debt out. Some cities are apprehensive about doing the bond because at the end of the day, the city is on the hook on the debt. Is that right?
Not on the tourist debt. The tourist would carry it. I think you're right. The criticism is just because I put a tourist, it's not going to make a project happen. So you can't go take a tourist, put it on the worst part of town, and somehow magically, that's where you're going to get a project.
The Texan boys are doing it around Starlight Ranch, that whole area there is a tiers.
Center City.
So San Antonio, if you know where the Pearl Brewery is, the Pearl up to Hildebrand and Carnot I worked on that. That's a tourist. What they did with that is they used the commercial growth to subsidize housing because there wasn't a lot of new downtown housing in San Antonio, so they used the tours to subsidize and incentivize residential. They're all over the place. Austin, Waller Creek has a tours where they're doing the Waller Creek redevelopment. I mean, these are used over 100 cities.
So you say they subsidize the residential, they subsidize the developer doing it?
On that one, what they did is they gave the developer a property tax rebate. And so they used the TERS to provide basically 100% property tax rebate to the developer for 10 years to take some of the risk off building residential. And so now that there's been so much residential, they stopped the program and now the market just takes care of itself. So a lot of times you may say, gosh, we really want to get a fill in the blank. You use this as the tool to provide the answer. And once you get it, you don't do it anymore. So a lot of times you also have some 4D money, 4A money, depending on what you have. People come in with other sources of money initially, as Joe said, to jumpstart this. But you're not going to have that pot of money. On the next slide, this would be a timeline. If you wanted to proceed, I think would make sense. I'm here today, I'd say early November, have your public hearing. What they typically do is have a public hearing, close the public hearing, and then approve them. Y'all do one reading. If there's a second reading, it works through the process. Then you would need to appoint some board members, you have to create a final project and finance plan, and then I'd go to the county when appropriate to gauge their interest and try to get them to join. It'd be great if they joined it this year. If they do it early next year, they still have the same 2021 base value. So if they join in 2022, they still use 2021. If that makes sense. It's a simple interlocal agreement. It just says the county's going to join at these terms for this many years. By state law, they are given at least one board. And you all would appoint the rest.
Commissioner to be on the board?
You can be, Paul, so definitely you can be.
You can, it's up to you. Every city does it different. A lot of cities, they don't want more meetings, so they appoint other people.
Yeah.
Some just do a slate, some do where every commissioner and the mayor get a person.
Putting the board.
Sure.
Makes a decision to spend the money on something, does it have to be approved by the county commissioners and city commissioners?
So it doesn't go back to the county once they join, it'll just come back to the city. So here's how most set them up. You can delegate all authority to the tourists and spend the money however they want. Most places don't. Most will say you can spend up to $10,000 or $15,000 without coming back to the city council. Anything above that, you've got to come back to us. So if you need to hire a civil engineer or do a site survey, you don't have to come back. It's typically done as a dollar amount. But if you want everything to come back through you, you can absolutely set it up that way too.
That's been my experience, Paul, is the commission does the final say, so.
Others will say, we're going to set up a facade grant program, and so here's $200,000, and you kind of manage the grant program at staff level. Those grants don't come back, but the idea of here's $50,000 to do this program does come through the city. So no right or wrong, depends on what makes the most sense for y'all. And we would deal with that in the bylaws of the TERS. So the step is you approve the TERS. I have to create what's called a preliminary project and finance plan. It's a short document, about 20 pages. You approve it, the TERS gets created. We're creating the boundary, the number of years, and the percent that we're sending to the TERS. You then appoint a board. They approve the final project and finance plan. Then the city council has to adopt that plan. It can go pretty quick. And then the TERS exists, and the TERS can spend money if and when it has to. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So if you go back to the map, we've done a number of iterations on that map. Go back to the aerial, one more. Keep going. There you go. You start running into residential, so we can make that little, pick up some industrial, commercial, but we can't really, unless we want to cut something out, we can't really go further to the left or to the right, or to the west.
Yes, we'll look at it. We could be real close. We'll look at it.
Right. So again, we can add some other. If we can add all the city-owned property we need to, and commercial, great. Residential just gives us problems. What other questions? What other concerns or thoughts you have about this?
I think that's the impetus of it too, but just timing of the downtown master plan, it just makes sense. We talked about, well, great, we come up with plans, but we've got to figure out how to fund some of these things. So this is one avenue to
I would also say cities can also contribute sales tax to a TERS. Most don't now, just due to the restrictions on property tax growth. Most are now just doing property tax. So if you so chose, you could put sales tax in as well. Most do not. And it would work the same way. Whatever you're collecting today is called the baseline. Anything above that is called the sales tax increment. You could put all or some of that in the TERS. Again, most don't.
How come we don't?
Just because there's so many restrictions on the property tax base with 3.5% cap. They want to have that flexibility in the general fund with the sales tax. So there's lots of projects. Y'all heard about them in the downtown master plan, redevelopment, taking some buildings down, building some new things, moving some stuff around. So I think you're right, Mayor. This is in line with that master plan.
So if you want to talk to the county, Jerry said that was the county.
Well, the school district, that would be huge if they would be willing to.
I've mentioned to the judge that we need to sit down and have a conversation. So that's what I asked the volunteers last time. And I think Gary and Cody, we're going to go with us, have those conversations.
Both in line would be money we're not getting.
Right.
Or are getting any.
Correct. Correct, and so, I wanted Travis to come speak to you before we scheduled that meeting in the fall, to make sure this commission was on board and ready to move forward. We wanted a good green light for him. And then, once Travis is done, and if y'all are good, to move forward, I'd like to go ahead and schedule that meeting with our county partner and our school partner.
And that's the agenda, so on that timeline, if we move forward, you'll see some variation of this, and we can talk to the county. I can as appropriate, or you can, or get on a Zoom, or whatever people do. That's no problem as part of this process. We definitely need to keep them informed. And the school district, would be good to join. School districts have some of their own unique issues with school finance, so that's a little bit more complicated to work through. It can be done. Others have done it, but I'd almost focus on the county first, and then we'll start, talking about it.
What's been your experience with county schools?
Counties do it all the time.
Not so much.
Schools have typically focused on Chapter 313, which no longer exists. I mean, that's sort of in flux. Depends on the size and the zone. It's more common to have cities and counties do it. Some hospital districts, some community colleges. If you know, I'm doing a work for, it's called the Trinity River Vision Tours in Fort Worth. So it's across from downtown. We're trying to realign the Trinity River. That one is the water district, the hospital district, the city, and the county.
It's a lot.
So but you only have, there's a hospital district, correct? Like
Yes.
a 5-cent tax.
We could get them, but it'd be that much.
Yeah, and sometimes on hospital districts, I'll be honest, politics, I think we would rather let the hospital district keep the money to do
There's
what
no
they do.
politics there, it's just.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a lot of money anyway, so it's probably more trouble than it's worth, to be honest, for the little bit they would contribute, but there's no reason you can't ask them.
Did you have any thoughts on the county, or did you just say that you think we can go and talk to them and send it your
Well, whatever you want to, I think they're important part of it.
Agree.
Both of them are good, that's just my everything.
I agree. And I think, speaking of, I think both entities, both our public partners.
We're gonna see, gonna get the gain, no matter what, we're gonna turn it on their tiers, but.
And they're gonna get the gain too, once the
Mhm.
tiers ends, they'll get
Yeah,
the
they'll
gain.
get the gain, they won't get it longer again.
And that really is the benefit, to pool the resources up front so you have some critical mass, because otherwise it sort of feels like a church bake sale. I mean, you're always coming back, and now it's like, okay, we've got a plan, we know it's gonna be here for 20 years. We can now go cut a deal with the developer. So now you could get someone to come buy a couple parcels, then come back to you and start that negotiating process. So let me ask you this, does this timeline make sense? Do you all feel comfortable putting it in place this year, knowing that y'all gotta get it done this year to lock in that baseline value? Is that doable?
They don't hire me as long as these guys want to do it.
I think that's the main thing, if everybody's comfortable with it. But we've discussed it.
Did you say you wanted to do
No,
that
I'm
too?
comfortable with it.
Yeah. My thought, talking with, this, I think in October, we can probably spend most of our time talking to, county and, our school district partners, see if we can get them.
I'm comfortable with it, because like you said, if we don't like it, 3 years,
Right.
if we don't have a partner, then we may not want it, because we're not gonna be doing that kind of partner.
One of the things I like about this is there's true intergovernmental relations more than any other board, the Tiers Board in my experience. And so, we may have the mayor on there and the county judge, and, a school board, a member or their representative. There's really good collaborative efforts because we're all in it together. And so it's one of the only things that I've seen that we're really all in it together, talking to one another on a regular basis. We do that staff-wise, but having our elected officials do that regularly, that doesn't happen all the time.
So the November presentation would be similar. Again, public hearing has to be part of this. So we've got to, as we think about the time, then we've got to back out the 7 days. We've got to get stuff to the paper, kind of standard stuff you're used to. But just keep that in mind. That's baked in a little bit to this calendar. So if we start moving dates around, we just got to make sure we hit those public notice requirements. But
I would hope that your fourth bullet point out there would happen before November 1st.
the public hearing before?
County participation.
Or the county presentation.
Oh, yeah, yes, sir, we can get that done whenever it makes sense. I just put that there because y'all need to work through the process of who should contact them and how that works with Canyon and the county. So I can come talk to them whenever they want to talk. And so Again, it's pretty straightforward. The interlocal agreements, I've got lots of examples. They're not very complicated. I mean, this isn't, again, it's money, so it matters, but it's not so much money that I think these need to be super complicated agreements. Join. What else? Okay, so my takeaways are going to be, I think we're working from kind of this timeline. I need to look with the city manager of making an adjustment and adding in a property or two.
Does everybody know what property I'm talking about? It's over by the railroad tracks, we have an economic deal. So all that's confidential right now, but does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Okay. So.
And then y'all feel comfortable using a map and parcel IDs to define it? State law doesn't tell you you don't have to do a formal meets and bounds, but if you do, we gotta get that done. So I think what we would do is we'd post to the paper a picture of it, and then post on the county website the map with all the parcel IDs. So
You're talking about meets and bounds within that time frame?
It takes a long time to get those.
It's not gonna happen within that time frame, I can tell you that.
Okay, so we're gonna work on the map, which is fine, and then the parcel IDs. So anybody who wants to see if they're in it, they can go to the city website, pull up a PDF, Google their parcel ID number, and they're good to go. So do y'all feel comfortable working at 25 years at 100%?
That would be staff's recommendation. 25 or 30 years and 100% county.
I think it ties in with the downtown master plan. I think we're gonna need it.
So you can extend these as well.
Does it need a motion?
John?
To direct staff, it's what it says.
I mean, we hear it, do you want a motion, Joe?
Yeah, I mean,
You want to go ahead and vote on it?
I would like to motion to proceed forward, as well as instructions to reach out to our two other governmental partners.
Second. We have a motion and second to move forward with the tiers and to reach out to our government partners. So, is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes.
Who made it first?
Commissioner Ray.
Commissioner Ray.
I believe second by Kelly.
So,
Or vote in.
I'll take that
do I sound like Cody? Does Cody sound like me?
Cody, did you second? Glad we got that clarified.
All right, so I'll see y'all in about 6 weeks, but if anything changes, given that we have one reading, we do have a little bit of time. I know y'all don't probably want to have special meetings, so plan on being back on the 1st.
We do anticipate probably in October, Travis, having conversations with both
Okay.
governing entities.
Great, okay.
And we'll coordinate with that.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Travis, appreciate you being here.
Okay, takes us to item number 7. Consider and take appropriate action on resolution number 35-2021, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Canyon, Texas, in order to make nominations to the Board of Directors of Randall County Appraisal District. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeffrey Dagley, our chief appraiser, Brad, indicated that we have a couple of district board members coming off. I worked closely with CISD on trying to find some people and recruit some good people to be on here. And these are the two names that we came up with. Robin Patterson, who works at West Texas A&M, Associate Dean over in Business. And then I'm not familiar with Diane Thurman, but another person that Superintendent, Assistant Superintendent recommended. Basically, they came up with one, I came up with the other, and we met in the middle. So, Robin, I think some of y'all know Robin. I know Cody says she knew Robin.
That Jason Rouse's sister.
Robin is.
Yeah.
Her husband owns the cabinet shop right there by CISD's happening in the week too. So, these would be my recommended nominees.
Anybody else have somebody to throw out, or?
Dennis, Mr. Bean's coming off, and Gilliland, I think is coming up. Those are the replacements. Yeah, that's fine.
Or any other nominations?
Resolution 35-2021, nominating Robin Patterson and Diane Thurman to serve on the Randall County appraisals and capabilities.
Second. Have a motion by our Mayor Pro Tem, and a second by Commissioner Ray. All in favor of the motion to nominate these two, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes. Okay, item number 8, consider and take appropriate actions on final purchase contract for the purchase contract for the, I think you may have that twice, for the purchase of property owned by D&I King Properties and Storage LLC, located at 200 Highway 60 for the purpose of utilization as office space, shop space, and storage space. John?
As y'all know, we've been discussing this purchase of property. Our water department has been out there for several years in this location. We looked for some other locations, found out that locations were expensive that we looked at, property value was, and we also know the cost of building new barns has escalated dramatically in the last few months. So I think our decision to move forward with the purchase of this was probably the right decision to make at that point in time, and it still is the best decision. What we'd like to do is move forward with this purchase. We've agreed to a price of $725,000 for the property, and then we're going to take $900,000 actually out of reserves. That was part of the budget process. You've heard about that 2 or 3 times on these screens where Joe's gone through the budget, taking $900,000 out of reserves. The other $175,000 will go. We want to take care of the fence. We're going to replace the fence. We've got some HVAC, possibly some lighting, some insulation, some other things that we want to do right off the bat, and just kind of upgrade the barn, get the barn where it needs to be for us to kick off and get things going. Mr. King has worked with us, and I think this is based on the price of land and also the price of barns. I think right now, going into this, we weren't sure of the price, but as of today, it seems like a pretty good price for the product that we're getting. So we'd like to move forward with that.
No comments. John covered it.
I know this is something we've talked about in the past. Commission, entertain a motion. This direction one ahead.
I move to execute a contract with D&I King Properties and Storage LLC for $725,000 for the purchase of the property at 200 Highway 60, and that we authorize an additional $175,000 from reserves to be used to make improvements on the property.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 9 is to consider and take appropriate action on proposal to conduct a comprehensive water, wastewater, and solid waste cost of service and rate design study. John?
Okay, once again, it's not January 6th, but it is today. We've discussed this. I believe we've discussed this before. It was part of.
January 6th?
No, I think it was.
That's my fault.
No, I put it on the line and then he got on 2. No. During the budget process, Joe talked to you all about this, the next gen strategies and solutions, that we wanted them to do conduct a comprehensive water, wastewater, and solid waste cost of service and rate design study. So you all have heard about this. We've talked about it. It was in the budget. Joe's already budgeted for it. And so at this point in time, we are just seeking authorization to sign the contract with him and move forward with that. Joe did. He's passed around to Dan and Chris and I the study from Borger. We saw the study from Borger and what they did. It looks like they really do a good job of diving into these areas and giving us suggestions on what we need to do and letting us know if we're in the ballpark on rates or we're not in the ballpark, or what we need to do.
And in addition to that, that we're equally distributing the share, you know, with commercial paying their fair share
Yes.
then versus residential. So that's been one of the big things in the past, and so they'll take a look at that. So 2 facts that came out of this. I know Mayor Hendricks mentioned the conservation aspect of the higher tiers. I have mentioned that, no issues on that. Our utility billing manager also mentioned about looking at our deposits for new account to see if they're adequately at the right levels. And I've spoken to New Gen on that as well. They have no issues with trying to do that as well. So those are the 2 that kind of were outliers prior or after this proposal was put together. So they go quite into this scope in the first 2 or 3 pages. So I try not to repeat all that, but I know y'all have taken a look at it and seen it. So.
And the last study we did, Dan, was with the former water director from Watauga, Texas. And that was 12 years ago.
That sounds about right.
It's been a long time here.
What, just 3 years ago?
It was a long time ago. If I remember her standing out here, it's been a long time since we've done that. And they'll give a go at looking at our rates for us.
More questions there? Or?
I make a motion when we execute a contract with Next Gen Strategies and Solutions for consulting services to perform comprehensive water, wastewater, and solid waste cost of service and rate design study for a cost of $75,000.
Second. Have a motion and a second to execute the contract with New Gen Strategies and Solutions. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. So, did you get all those, Chris? I'm sorry, I didn't see. I guess Kelsey voted right quick. So.
Yes.
Okay.
I got all.
Well, good. Item number 10, I think we will go ahead and move this item to after executive session, item number 14, and go ahead and take on item number 11 at this time. So, with that, we will consider and take appropriate action on resolution number 37-2021, a resolution by the City of Canyon, Texas, denying Southwestern Public Service Company's proposed rate increase request in connection with its statement of intent submitted on about February 8, 2021, requiring reimbursement of reasonable legal consultant expenses, finding that the meeting complies with the Open Meetings Act, making other findings and provisions related to the subject. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excel, known as Southwestern Public Service. This one's mostly under, if you look under item number 6, will tell you what their main reason for their increase. Just a reminder, the City of Canyon has original jurisdiction with rate making. Is
that it, Chuck?
number 6, that's the justification for their increases. This does not include the previous rate case. We suspended another rate case in regards to fuel factor. That was related to the winter weather, which were not as dire straits as some of the south part of Texas. But that surcharge is making its way through the Public Utilities Commission of Texas right now. So this is a separate one. Most of these are for capital. You can see those under 6, A, B, and C, capital additions, some depreciation rates, migration of Lubbock Power and Light for ERCOT, and some other equity and capital structure. We have a rate case attorney, Freya Herrera, and they have recommended all of us to suspend this and deny this resolution. Excel knows that that's probably coming, and so we, as an organization, with the other Axiom cities like Pampa, Dumas, Borger, Amarillo, Harrington, all the other cities are taking the same action. They are very aware that we are going to deny this. But you can see the jump in the rates in these boxes as well. And then I included some spreadsheets that also put in the other surcharges. Those are the ones that come subsequent to the memo. And so you can see the proposed fuel factor surcharge as well, because that is a separate matter related to the winter bid. So. Anybody has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer that. It's our recommendation to deny their SPS rate increase request.
So the motion to deny?
Yes.
So the motion would be to adopt?
Yes. Correct. That's correct. Adopt resolution number 37, 2021, which is a resolution to deny SPS's rate.
I'll make that motion.
Motion number 37-2021. All in favor of the motion, signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes. You know what, with that, I think, Gretchen, looks like we need to wait until 4:30 to have the public hearings here. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and that way I think it would also probably be fair if somebody was here for that entire item. Probably be the right thing to do. So,
Yes, we legally
let's
published
take a,
they would start at 4:30.
Let's take a 10-minute break, and we will start back at 4:30.
Chuck? Yeah. Talking about closed session. Sure.
This block right here is all cut. Little church. That's where this little this is all
More interesting.
This this is project. How you doing, man? Good. You did okay? So they always got in
The way
unless they vote. This is a high cost. Especially this. That's not gonna give you everybody else unless they got a plan here that we're not aware of. That small freaking thing. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, I'm like you, especially that.
Yeah, because they have their total program 11,000 gallons.
Oh, it comes up a half. They're trying to lob off residential.
Well, the problem Yeah, that's a private decision versus their stuff. I can't believe you have to own the enforcement on it. But they won't make it enforcement, but they have to know. Like every time, someone like, I think that's probably the fact. Not the fact, but the only way they'll get something. The way they make it sound, they want to start.
It's not-
I don't really get what I should do. And swap.
I don't think we're gonna rehash what you've already heard. I think it's important that, of course, the mayor runs it, but I am gonna mention your name. I'm not gonna give any details. I don't think it's gonna hurt you details of what your plans are. I'll discuss the code of issues, our responses, and what the P and Z recommend. Give some detail when it comes down to
EDC on 6.
tactical
So I said, well, we need
8
to pick that
units,
up again.
8 minutes. I'm gonna let you discuss it. I don't wanna, cause
They made it sound like.
I don't wanna put words in your mouth. That's your plan. But it's not gonna be.
Have money, government money, they have to spend.
Different. They'll have, I think they'll have more questions. Yeah, they tend to discuss more. Yeah, they should. I mean, they could write it. They just show up and know it's a good idea.
And then.
I reckon it's a good idea. Yeah, John Burns, Craig Brown works for me. Yeah, I try to keep him in the loop so they see what I'm doing. There was nobody here that showed up. That's the lesson I was trying to tell them. Very involved. I think the whole the way you do that is great thing. Yeah, that's still young to me.
Yeah, true. Well, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm sure they'll give you a chance.
Oh, it is.
Very good. Same old thing,
We'll pick this up. And then we'll cost us. That part there is love. It just has part of that. And with the way it's now, this one, push the
Yeah. Later on. You tell me. That's really. National spell tower. It doesn't suggest, as long as you're. How do you run that? They don't tell us how it's right, or lots, or they go bad. That's not a huge question. He picks this up. Kelly never got back to me, I didn't know about that. Kelly always shows up.
That's what I told
Man, I had to think twice. That release is for you. It's great for you.
It's saying that when I posted it on Facebook.
didn't hear some.
No, but.
Couple of years.
We're working together to get this person a product that he presents because waiting on you.
Not the city manager. Don't see the city manager there yet.
Oh, yeah. Somebody's.
Start without it?
Go see, man.
We might have to.
He ain't running nothing.
We'll let John take.
Where did he run off to?
He was running around.
Yeah, I think he should.
Oh, yeah, on the check.
How about that quarter?
Oh, yeah, okay, great.
Okay, item number 12 is conduct a public hearing and consider and take appropriate action on ordinance number 1143, rezoning 2520 Fifth Avenue, and the ordinance of the City of Commission of the City of King, Texas, rezoning 2520 Fifth Avenue, a property of the City of Randall County, providing that the zoning class be posted on the zoning district maps of the City of Canyon, providing that all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are expressly repealed and proving for an effective date. Matt?
Thank you, Mayor. This is zoning a little lot on 2520 Fifth Avenue to multifamily. It's right adjacent to a multifamily zoning district. Mr. Allison's here. He can give you some details on what his plans are for that property. Approved 19 letters, and of those we received 5 in opposition, requested 2 in support of. That 5 in opposition takes us over this 20-foot mark where this approval will require a 3/4 majority, in other words, 40 for the approval of that. Since we had more than 20% of the property goes within 200 feet of opposing the request. think, Gretchen, if you can scroll to the future use map. I do want to, I hope you guys have noticed, I'm trying to refer to that conference plan, future use map more often. It's really not the map in here, it's just after the responses. As you can see, that area I've marked, the yellow area is recommended for low density residential, that's 1 and 2 family homes. The brown area is the area that's recommended for high density. As I said, the zoning map, actually everything to the east of 26th is currently zoned multifamily. And this is actually 2 lots, like I mentioned, 2 50-foot lots. So I like to show that, as you guys know, the comprehensive plan, that future use map is a suggestion of how we want to go. But it is recommended for low density, whereas the high density is across the street there, 26th Street. And you guys have the responses there within your packet. We've got a picture there just showing the existing structure. That is it's one address, but it's actually 2 50-foot lots. It's a very large lot. I won't give you details of what Mr. Allison's plans are. I'll let him describe that to you. As you know, any zone multifamily, you guys have some questions for me.
What did you say, first has to make the supermajority?
It has, if you have, we send out letters, required by law to send out letters to property owners within 200 feet. And by our ordinance, if one of two things happen. If you have more than 20% of those property owners with 200 feet, either by number or by area, are opposed, then it takes more than just a simple 3-2 majority to approve that vote. It takes a 4, minimum of 4 to approve that. It's the same thing as some of you guys did way back on the Walmart issue. This will require at least a minimum of 4 members to approve it, and the P&Z did vote unanimously to.
Thing I'd like to know, I mean, I know that's kind of right on the edge, but I don't know. I would have a concern too. If I were, across the street, looks like the floor plan is for, is it 4 or 8 students?
It's for 8 total students.
So 8 total.
Correct. I think a lot of things that Mr. Allison had to say to this, I think the area, they had a lot of discussion about the location of the area, that there's a lot of multifamily, a lot of college student rentals over there in that property. They talked a lot about how many of these people, responses and otherwise, within 200 feet, how many of those properties were owner-occupied versus how many are rental properties. And there was some discussion about the parking issues. There's a lot of college students park in that area on the street. And Mr. Allison pointed out that although our code recommends or requires, since there's 2 units, basically a stackable duplex, that would require 2 parking spaces per dwelling. In other words, 4 parking spaces to be provided. He's going to provide 8 off-street parking spaces because this is a 4-bed or a total of 8 beds within that structure. So, what points that was on-street parking and promotes more off-street parking because you provide those 8 parking spaces. But I think if it's close to housing, at least rental housing in that area, still the majority of people either didn't respond or were in support of. And although that future use map doesn't represent that as a recommended use, that area tends to be a lot of college housing. Do you agree with that assessment, Mr. Burners?
I was at that meeting also, so yes, I would say that, yeah. And that lot has 2 rental properties on it, correct?
Correct. At this point, it does have 2 rental properties.
2 separate.
I think they consider the improvement to the area with that new structure.
That was my view.
There's another one behind that house.
Yes,
There is.
sir.
Another rental house in the backyard of that?
That house, on the right-hand side of that house, there's a drive that would go back to another little place. If you've driven by there, the pink car lives in the back, and those people that drive that neighborhood know what I'm talking about. There's a car that's very pink that parks right back there in the grass for that second living.
John sees things like that.
I drive down that street on the way to work and everywhere I go, so.
There's some unique aspect.
It is always.
It's a Chrysler, as a matter of fact, it's not a Warner.
What's the license plate?
So Danny, I
It's not an Avon car,
actually
it's
drove
not a
by there
Cadillac.
before the meeting, I'm trying to remember, back to the east, are there apartments directly to the east?
No, there's some single-family dwellings there.
No, everything to
It's
the
zoned,
west.
it's zoned multifamily.
You know, I just remember seeing the house across the street, it's a really nice house, I could see why.
Yeah, the lady, you talking about the one to the north?
To the north.
Yeah,
I could see why, probably.
There's also a couple structures over there that, to be honest with you, they need to work their code enforcement aspect.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. That's a nice looking house across the street.
Is she one of the people that
Was opposed.
So your structure gonna be brick stuff?
Right now, what I'm envisioning is probably a stucco stone combination. And I could cover some of those things.
Yeah, I think especially through Mr. Allison's presentation, I feel like they felt like there was not gonna be a lot. It's not what he's planning for. Like I say, multifamily allows you to do anything multifamily allows for in the end. What he's planning for would not create a huge amount of traffic issues because you're gonna provide in excess of off-street parking more than what he's required to provide. I think that impressed him a lot.
Can we pull it up on Google Maps?
Are we able to do that? See the view of, I know we've got the map in here, but just the Google map.
Cheryl may be able to,
Switch to.
I don't have Google Maps on my.
Yeah, this is,
There we go.
Pink car.
you got some multifamily here, as you can see right here. And there's three single families, another single family. This property
So
here,
really
this,
to the north, and really those houses to the west, or on the west part of that block, are pretty nice houses.
Mhm. Yes, sir. Yeah, that certainly crosses over that multifamily zone into a single-family zone.
It appears that those maps were just drawn basically based on what was there currently. Is that, would you say that?
The future use, absolutely.
Because they put one odd thing on the other side because it was there, so it was basically just repeating what was.
Yeah, a
what
lot
was
of that
there
was.
When you got into the.
You got so much majority of the area, we just simply were going for the existing stuff.
Yeah, as everybody's seen, that, go to our public hearing and open our public hearing. And have Scott Allison has signed you. Scott.
Thank you.
What's your name and address, please?
Yes, sir. Nothing like being first. But Scott Allison, I'm with Champion One Builders. Residence is 8405 Patriot in Amarillo, 79119. And as Denny suggested, we have purchased the property at 2520 Fifth Avenue. It's kind of nice when I can see it up there. So there are a lot of ways to go about what we're planning on to do there, but I don't know if I'm limited to this 3 minutes, but so just looking at the progression of WT and what they're trying to do in the city, just the curb appeal coming in from the Amarillo side coming into Kingman, the upgrades that they've made when you go one block off of 4th, which is where we're at on 5th, you do have a lot of student housing there that is currently there. Looking at the letters that were sent out and the responses that were brought back in, out of that whole street, there's 2 residents that actually live there. All the rest of the properties are rented. So it's one thing just to ask for consideration on. Most of these houses, just like this here, have a single. Oh, did I do that? Okay. Here's our pink car, but this has an apartment in the back, also living quarters in the front. Both of these residents are being rented. The house next door, which we were fortunate enough to have that homeowner here at the meeting, at the P&Z meeting, in support, but his is also a rental as well. This one's a rental. I think this last one on the end is an occupied, but we did have one resident across the street that was also in support. If you go back to the picture of the house in general, a lot of all the trees have died, you know, probably 50, 60-year-old trees. You can see here, this one back here, there's a lot of, just in general, and then the way that this curb is set up here, you do have parking there every day that, like they said on the letters, from 8 to 5 during the school year. I mean, this whole area is full of cars, people walking to the university. What our plan would be to demolish all of this and build what Danny said is a stackable duplex. But what's interesting about the dynamics of this, nothing's drawn yet, but what my vision is I think from the road, you'd really have to study it to know that that's what it is, a multifamily residence. From the front, I think this would be a single door entry, look like a house from the front, but our second floor duplex would enter from the back. And so you'd have 4 stalls of parking that we would put off the road into the land to get those cars off the street, which is going to eliminate future parking from other students trying to park there. So it's actually going to free up the street more than it does right now instead of hindering it. And then really looking at some of the responses from some of the homeowners there, I think our students are going to walk to class. I don't know that they're getting a car off the property to go across 4th Avenue to get to school. But it's easy for me to say I don't live there, you know, and I don't go to school there. But as far as the quality of facility, just to give you a little bit of background on what we do, we're a residential home builder, do a little bit of commercial, but a residential home builder. Most of our homes are 600 and up. So it's not a hodgepodge property that we're putting there. It's still really, I think, turning the direction of what DOT is trying to do. And if I look at the future of Canyon, I may see over the next 20 years all those streets doing the same thing to convert over to what the college is doing. And we've seen similar residences like this at Tech, Texas State, UT. I just see WT falling right behind them in those steps. Anyway, that's what we're thinking.
So as far as concerns from, say, the houses they're very nice houses on the other side of the street, and also they're concerned as far as just the street view and where will the parking be then? So
What I'm thinking right now is those 4 stalls will be in the front and then 4 stalls will be in the back, so it'll be totally excluded from the street view. Now, what we have right now that they don't understand probably in the dynamics of it, we do have 2 lots there. And we can build 2 single family, 4-bedroom, 4-bath houses side by side on those lots if, as long as it fits the code enforcement. So what we're really doing is just taking what's there, which my understanding that front house had 4 boys renting it in the front, and then a single pink car renting in the back. The dynamics really isn't changing from what they're dealing with right now, other than I think we're making it better for them as a homeowner. I think I was trying to understand a little bit of what you were saying on the west side, because on the size of houses and what's going there, I do agree that the house directly across the north is a nice house. I don't know that anything else is.
I think the one on the end of the block maybe is fairly
A little bit nicer, a little bit that had some refreshment done to it. Certainly, we'd just be, revamping that.
Somebody else may have some questions or comments too. My concern is, especially for those houses on the north side of the street, that just the curb appeal, and whether that's parking or how much parking's on the front, or just the fascia of the house, and it sounds like you have stone and stucco would be pretty nice for that.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And what if you said you drive by there every day to go to work? Like, it'll make that drive nicer coming into work. But that's what they're looking at now. We have screens torn and all this fascia rotting, So I'm asking for your support.
The other 4 guys, I don't know how y'all feel, but I will tell you about Scott and his wife, both. They're two of the finest people in the Panhandle, no question about it. He's one of the finest builders we have in the Panhandle too. He builds an excellent home. So whatever he does over there, I would not have one to worry about.
You've done several like this in town, haven't you, Scott?
Tell me?
Have you done more like this in town?
Not in Canyon.
Okay.
This will be the first dynamic of this standpoint. It took 2 of my kids going through college and wanting to strangle them to kind of figure out what we needed to do and what we wanted to do. But one thing, I don't know that we have in Canyon a nice place. Like if you had your, I'm saying daughter, but it can be a son too. But boys, they can go play in the backyard. But the girls, we just really don't have a nice place. If you're going to a school out of town, where is that at? Where do they stay? Especially once they're past the dorm standpoint of the first year.
Well, any other questions from you? All right. Well, Scott, thank you. Appreciate your comments. And I don't believe, Rich, it looks like Scott's the only one that did sign.
Yes, sir.
Okay. With that, we will close the public hearing. The entertainment.
Make a motion we approve ordinance 1143.
Have a motion and a second to approve. To approve ordinance number 1143. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes. So, by unanimous vote. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
All right, that takes us to item number 13, to conduct a public hearing and consider and take appropriate action on ordinance number 1144, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Canyon, Texas, fixing the ad valorem tax rate and providing for the levying of ad valorem taxes for the use and support of the municipal government of the City of Canyon, Texas, for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2021, and ending September 30th, 2022, at the rate of 0.426180 per $100, and for directing the assessment thereof, providing for a date on which such taxes become due and delinquent, together with penalties and interest thereon, providing for repealing savings and severability clauses, providing for an effective date of this ordinance, and providing for the publication of the caption hereof. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've talked about this numerous times. Gretchen, if you'll pull up tax rate distribution page on the agenda. Right there. So here's our breakdown. Our M&O is going up fourth, 10,000. So 10,000th place, you can see right there on the very last line. And our INS, or debt service for the cap, is going down significantly. Our tax rate is technically less than last year's. However, being that we had a $60 million valuation increase, it's still, under the eyes of the law, a revenue increase. Overall, it's raising on average about $11 a year. So $11 to $14 a year. You can see what we're looking at bringing in on these. I've added the new tax page on the next page for our property tax breakdown. This is the actual dollar amounts that we're bringing in. We always estimate property taxes at 98.5% collection rate, but we do tend to have about a 99.5 collection rate. These are assumed at 100% collection, so that is what you're seeing here. You can see we've almost diminished $100,000 in the debt service rate, which is not a big deal. Joel and I just merely want to make sure that debt's being serviced. And so that had a massive jump on the debt service rate from $446,000 to $353,000 a year. And so we had a small increase on the actual maintenance and operations. So you can see that number up there. I think all in all, at 100% collection rate, it's $191,000. And those funds are going to fund 2 new streets staff members and a new firefighter. Those 3 positions eat up that entire revenue increase. So that's what those funds are being used for as we go forward.
So those 3 things again, please.
2 members, 2 new staff positions in the street, and a new firefighter are eating up that entire revenue. So we'll be 7 people strong under Brendan, our superintendent for solid waste and street. We'll have 7 streets, and then Dennis, that brings us to 8 in your department. 8 with Gina.
8 with Gina.
8 with Gina. So that brings them to 8. So I think we've had 1 firefighter last year, this year. So we've added 2. So this will be actually a firefighter position. So that's where that entire increment is going to. Does anybody have any questions? I can go through a lot more detail. Joel and I have already gone through most of this with you guys. Gretchen, will you go down to the next page? Keep going down. There's the breakdown. You can see we're adopting the voter approval rate of 0.42618, which is unfortunately less than my thoughts on this year's rate, but by law that's what we have to adopt. Keep going, Gretchen, to the next page. So our effect on our average home folks, keep going down. This is what our effect is on everybody. We've already gone over the values. I can go over that again if you need me to. $27 million increase in existing values and $27 million in new property. Go down to the next page, Gretchen. Right there. Can you zoom in? This is our impact. On the average household, went up by 4.66% in in values. You can see that at the top. You can see we went from 182 to 191, which exactly is $14.49 a year, which is $1.21 a month, 4 cents a day. And then the bottom one is the city manager's house. You can see exactly how much that went up. I went up by 3.74% in my valuation, and then you can see I'm paying $11.60 more a year. So a prime example of what that looks like.
However, the tax rate did go down.
Yes, the tax rate went down. That is correct.
I think that's
My
a
whole-
great point,
whole
is,
piece.
yeah, the actual tax rate actually did decrease.
Yes, from, last year was 0.43809, this year is 0.42618, so it went down a whole hundred foot point. Does anybody have any final thoughts? We've gone over this quite a bit. I had it in my budget presentation, so y'all kind of hammered these details out. We do have a public hearing tonight to adopt this. This is the last item for our budget and tax rate for the year as we move into the next fiscal year. Our fiscal year for this year will close on September 30, and this will go into effect October 1. So, y'all should see
Was this leaked during that budget presentation?
Yeah, let's get started back up. Let's go back again. Go ahead.
Can be vetoed.
If anybody has any specific questions, I've included the tax rate worksheet in here and the appraisals, but most of that we've already gone over. I don't want to bore y'all anymore, as Gary would mention, so thank you, Gary.
We appreciate that. You know what, I really do appreciate the detailed information. There's been great information that's brought to us as the commission, so kudos to you and Joel and staff.
Appreciate that, sir. We'll say SPS is our new property tax leader. Excel building the substation now is #1 on our top taxpayer report. So I think Walmart's probably 2 or tied with it. Staff is recommend a motion to adopt the proposed tax rate. By record vote. Thank you, Chip. After we do the public hearing, yes.
Very important.
Yes, go ahead.
All right, with that, we will open the public hearing.
Nobody has signed it, Mayor.
Thank you, Gretchen. With that, we'll close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion? Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we. What
Yeah,
is it, Doreen?
yeah, this is the recommended motion at the end. Kelsey on the memo. If you go to the memo, you'll see the staff recommended motion.
Well, I'm way too far down. Does anyone else have it pulled up?
148.
Okay, it's highlighted in yellow.
Do you have that, Chelsea, to read that highlight?
Yeah, it's right there on the PDF.
Okay, found it.
There you go, yeah.
I move that the property tax rate be increased by the adoption of a tax rate of 0.384590 as the maximum M&O tax rate and 0.041590 as the maximum INS proposed tax rate for combined tax rate of 0.42618. Valuation, which is effectively a 0.71% increase in the tax rate revenue, and that ordinance 1144 setting the city of King's combined ag land tax rate to be adopted. Did I get it all?
You did.
Okay.
Good job, Kelsey.
I'll second. Have a motion and second. If there's no further discussion, this does require a record vote. Commissioner Ward, how do you vote?
How do you do that?
You can just raise your hand or say yay.
Yes.
Okay. Yea or nay?
Yay.
Mayor Pro Tem Jones? I vote yea. Commissioner Bunce?
Yay.
Commissioner Red? Motion passes unanimously. So, thank you all.
Thank you all for bearing with us through the budget and tax rate process. We know it's a burden every year.
Well, it's a big part of what we do, so good work. So.
One of the most important things we do.
All right, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn into exec session, and then we will take care of the last item. Bye.
Item 4?
Yes.